Welcome back to another Throne and Liberty video, and in this one I got some bad news for all my fellow tanks out there. So we know it's been rough on the world bosses and getting loot, and Amazon has released how loot tables work for distribution. So on the post from Reddit, they linked over to the official Throne and Liberty webpage, but they also gave us a quick little TLDR. So especially for peace mode, it says contribution consists of damage done and healing done and is tracked individually, not per party as we once thought. So tanks are blanked, as expected by anyone who plays a tank. It's a fun time for us. Majority of possible boss loot is contribution based, so contribution directly influences your chances of getting an item. There's also a random drop that anyone who participated and met the minimum contribution can get. So that would explain when random people get random drops, but for the most part it's based off what you personally contributed in terms of damage. So I'm sorry tank boys, we're screwed. Let's go more in depth. Loot distribution rules from the official Throne and Liberty. So contribution is earned by doing damage against the enemy and healing friendly players in battle while said enemy is active. Contribution from healing is acquired from healing players both in and out of your party when participating at guild level events. So those are the field bosses. Loot drop during dynamic events is collected to turn in for event progress. For example, wolf tails in the wolf hunting event. So now if we look back down into how actual loot distribution works, we'll have a good idea of how it all plays out. So this is applicable for all the general activities that we have in the games, open world farming, abyss dungeons, etc, etc. So for the distribution rules, when an enemy dies, loot is assigned to the player who first earned contribution. So you need to have first hit in. If a player is in a group, the loot is assigned to the player's party instead. In this case, the drops from the enemy have an equal chance of distribution across all party members. The exception is party members that have no contribution or are out of range will be excluded from the drop pool. Kind of makes sense. You got to be grouped up together in order to get loot. All items are evenly distributed when possible. That means if there is 10 items dropped for a party of 5, each player should receive 2 items. If distribution is not possible, it will randomly select a player to receive an extra drop. So, that's good news that when you're doing event group based, everyone gets basic loot. That's good news. For the peace mode bosses and guild raids, this is where it gets interesting. When a peace mode field boss dies, all players are sorted by individual player contribution. And a note is that a guild's overall contribution does not play a role. So that's interesting. So for our tank boys, player contribution, getting aggro does not count. It's based off damage. So players must meet a minimum contribution to be eligible to receive loot from the boss. Makes sense. There are 2 drop types that come from each peace mode boss. So for a contribution drop, each item is distributed based on chance according to individual contribution. Okay? Random drops. Each item is randomly provided only to remaining players who do not receive one of the contribution drops, so you should not be getting both. Cool, no problems with that. It's a 1-to-1. If you get an epic loot, you're not going to get a random loot as well. We're happy with that. For conflict mode bosses, loot is assigned in a 2-stage process. First, loot is assigned to a guild. Then, the loot is assigned to players within the guild. Okay. When a field boss dies during conflict mode, a guild's contribution is calculated as the sum of the individual contribution for each player in the guild who participated in the fight. So the more guildies you have in the field, the better it is for you for conflict mode only. The guilds are then sorted based on contribution. Unlike peace mode bosses, dying to an enemy or another player during a conflict mode boss will result in the dying player losing 70% of their individual contribution, meaning it reduces the guild's total contribution at the end of the match. Once a guild has been assigned an item, all participating players within the guild have equal chance to obtain the item. especially for peace mode bosses where there's a lot of solo players going for it, being a tank, you're screwed. Your contribution will not be high enough in order to get that loot that you expect. Now, in a guild raid, for a conflict mode, your chance is a little bit better because it's guild based. As long as you don't die, which tanks have a hard time dying, you'll do better. But to go back to the TLDR, tanks are screwed, and I apologize. And I feel your pain as a fellow tank. I'm hoping that Amazon will change this in the future. Seeing their track record of listening to player feedback, we can only hope that it gets better from now. So I hope that you guys all get epic loots, and until next time.